Hey, welcome back. So video 2 of fixing up some SeaDoo skis. This video starts discussing the seized up steering column and seized up reverse cable. So if you're interested in those two items, continue on. Otherwise, move on to the next video.
All right, round two. So when I purchased it, you could not budge these handlebars. It was like it was screwed down and completely immobile. No matter how hard you tried, whether you jumped on top of it and gave it the old He-Man effort or what have you. But I fixed her up. Look how nice and smooth that is. What happens is salt and sand gets into the steering column. This plastic column down in here that's hard to see. And it locks it up. It's as simple as that. So you've got to remove all these bolts, and there's two over here on this side too. Remove all those bolts. You'll need to remove the panel inside the front compartment with the fire extinguisher so you can reach in there and get to the bolts on the other side of the plastic piece that's held in by these two. So there's some bolts down at the bottom of it. And what that'll allow you to do is take the whole handlebar assembly and flip it over, and you can work on it. And I got some pictures of that coming up shortly. Now, the other thing you can do, if you're not sure if it's the steering column seized up, is you can come back to the back and you can remove your steering linkage with this bolt there, and then you can take a pair of pliers and what have you and basically remove the steering linkage and work on it on a bench, add some lubrication to it if need be. In my case, it was just the seized up column.
Here in the first picture, you can see what it looks like when the steering column has been flipped upside down. You can see what's inside that rectangular box that you just unbolted from the top of the ski. One thing to note here that I ran into is the two bolts that hold that plastic round piece over the center column. It's in two halves, so it's got two bolts. One of them, and this is one of the problems with all these jet skis, is the nut behind it. You know, it's embedded in a hex cavity in the plastic, but that really doesn't hold the nut in place, and it eventually starts spinning. That did that to me on this one. I ended up having to drill one of them out and replace it after the fact. Here you see the inner shaft. When I've removed the top of the two halves, the clam piece that fits around it, those grooves are what spins and stops the steering handlebars in the right places. As you can see, they were just, all that white in there is just caked up sand and salt and water that has basically turned to concrete, or damn near close to it, and so it just seized the whole column. And what you have to do is you got to clean it all out. You can get a pick out and pretend you're a dental assistant, because I assume this is on the order of picking plaque off people's teeth. Here's the bottom of that clamshell two-piece part that wraps around the column. Same problem, you know, the white in there, the part that's stuck to this side. So, you know, once again, you clean it all out around the column, around both these two halves. Just get in there, take your time, and just pick it all out. It takes a while, but it is well worth it. Here you can see I actually had to rebolt down the housing for the steering column and climb atop the machine, and while rotating, or trying to rotate as best I could, I think it was a little stiff at this point, but it was starting to move. I was able to finally, you know, pull on it while rotating it, and it would eventually pop out, because the housing has two, you know, close fitting cylinders, one at the end and one almost to the top. You can kind of see them there. One's white, one looks fairly clean already. That have to be cleaned as well. I mean, once that salt and sand gets in there and seizes things up, you know, that clearance is so tight that there's no room for that in there. So get your sandpaper out. You can see my sandpaper there. It's a weaved piece of sandpaper that's, you know, got spaces so stuff can fall through it. Works pretty well. sand it, give it a nice smooth surface, and get that clearance back in there so it can rotate. Not 100% sure why I took this picture as I'm putting things back together. I might be showing the new bolt I put in there after drilling the old one out, or maybe it's just a picture for the orientation. But you can see it's a lot cleaner now. All that white stuff has been scraped off. Also, before I put it back together like this, I found some plastic safe lubricant slash grease and put it on all the interfacing parts. Anything that's going to slide and rotate on itself against another part. Lubed it up to try to help, you know, keep things nice and smooth operating and potentially prevent this from happening again. And in my last picture, before we move on, you can see kind of how I had the handlebars resting up against the hood open and, you know, in a position to where I could access and work on things while I'm putting stuff back together, bolting that clamshell part back on before I reinstall everything back onto the ski. It worked out pretty well and solved my problem. I hope this helps somebody.
Then there was the reverse handle. Reverse handle's right here. You couldn't pull it up, it was stuck, and it should be fairly smooth. You should be able to just pull it right up, have the reverse operated, push it down, and being forward. Ended up having a seized up linkage cable. Inside the front compartment, you can push in these two tabs, these two plastic tabs. I don't know if you can see them, but you can push them in and just remove this whole little glove box, and then you'll have access to inside there to where you can unscrew the linkage cable for the reverse lever from the handle. And then if you come to the back of the machine and you remove that nut and bolt there, that's the other end of it. You can take off that plastic hex nut back there, and you can basically remove the cable out of the skis, maybe bolt it down to a bench or a vise and start forcing it. It's probably rust locked, so you got to get that cable to start moving and lube it up, get some lubrication in there, and then the problem goes away. With the glove compartment removed, the little storage bin, and if you look in there, you can see the other end of the reverse linkage right there connected to that bolt and nut. That's what you'll have to remove if you want to get the linkage out of the ski and work with it on the bench. Once you get it lubricated and moving freely, just reinstall. Well, that's all today. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you see and you want to see more, look for video number 3, where we start to review more complicated items, but yet still high failure points on these skis. And that's the bellows, the carbon ring, the floating ring. I'm not sure if we'll have time in the same video to talk about inspecting the supercharger to see if it needs to be rebuilt. If not, it'll be in video 4, but we will find out. And thanks again.